The screen flickered to life, casting eerie shadows on the faces of the audience. The theater was nearly empty, save for a handful of die-hard fans who whispered excitedly in the dim light. On the screen, a traveling Chautauqua show was in full swing, a blend of old-fashioned entertainment and small-town charm. But something was off. The performers seemed too eager, the crowd too subdued. And then, without warning, a scream tore through the silence. The camera panned to reveal a young woman, her face twisted in terror. She was running, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The audience leaned forward, hearts pounding. Where was she going? Who was chasing her? And then, just as suddenly, the screen went black. The credits rolled and the title appeared, The Trouble with Girls. Elvis Presley, looking more relaxed and handsome than ever, walked onto the stage. The camera followed him as he moved through the bustling crowd, his presence commanding attention. Despite the film's chaotic editing and unresolved plot lines, Elvis's charm and charisma shone through. He was the star, and everyone in the theater knew it. Roger Greenspun, a respected film critic, wrote that the movie was a charming mess, with a fortunate murder and several pleasant songs. He praised Elvis's performance, saying that the film seemed to live within the styles and language of the 1920s, even though the songs didn't quite fit the period. But not everyone agreed. Some critics found the film below par, straining credibility even by Elvis Presley's standards. They thought Elvis was lost in the story, and without his usual dozen songs, the movie had little to offer. Yet, there were moments that stood out. Elvis's performance of Almost was one of the most poignant in the film. The camera lingered on his face, capturing a vulnerability that was rare for him. The song was a beautiful ballad, almost as if it were written for Frank Sinatra, but Elvis made it his own. The trippy editing of Clean Up Your Own Backyard was another highlight, with its protest-like lyrics and catchy melody. It was a forgotten gem, waiting to be rediscovered. The opening scenes were particularly impressive, with the camera capturing the vibrant energy of the Chautauqua. Director Peter Tewksbury handled the large cast and crowd scenes with skill, creating a rich and detailed world. The film might have been edited down from a longer version, but those first few minutes were a feast for the eyes. The songs, though, were a mixed bag. Clean Up Your Own Backyard was the standout, a perfect blend of wit and melody. Almost was a touching ballad, marred only by some unfortunate overdubs. Swing Down Sweet Chariot was a pleasant re-recording, but ultimately unnecessary. The other songs, like the Whiff and Poof song and Violet, were brief and forgettable. Signs of the Zodiac was mostly Marilyn Mason's song, with Elvis adding a few lines here and there, but it was a bit tedious. But the real magic happened in the studio, a few months before the film's release. Elvis, determined to revive his career, headed to American studios in Memphis. Producer Chips Moman pushed him harder than anyone had in years, and the results were stunning. The songs from these sessions were deeper and darker, reflecting Elvis's life experiences and the maturity he had gained. Long Black Limousine was a tour de force, a powerful story of a girl who left her small town for the city, only to return in a hearse. Elvis's performance was raw and emotional, leaving no doubt about his commitment. This Is the Story followed, with its unique chord progressions and sincere lyrics. Elvis's voice was in top form, and he delivered a performance that was both heartfelt and compelling. Wherein That Loved On Look was a soulful mix of rock and funk, perfect for Elvis. He seemed to be rediscovering his love for music, adding his own touches to the song. You'll Think of Me was a longer, more challenging track, but Elvis relished the opportunity to explore new territory. A Little Bit of Green was a mid-tempo ballad that stretched his range, and he rose to the challenge with a superb performance. I'm Movin' On was a country classic given a soulful makeover, while Gentle on My Mind mixed country, soul, and gospel with a driving bass line. Don't Cry Daddy and Mama Like the Roses were tear-jerking ballads that showcased Elvis's ability to convey deep emotion. Inherit the Wind and My Little Friend were more rhythmic ballads, each with their own story to tell. And then there was In the Ghetto, a powerful message song about the struggles of life in a Chicago slum. Elvis's performance was so moving that it became a hit, resonating with listeners who felt the song's truth. Rubbernickin' provided a welcome change of pace, an infectious mix of rock, funk, and soul that let Elvis let loose. The film The Trouble with Girls might have been a mess, but it was a mess that allowed Elvis to shine. The songs from the Memphis sessions, however, were a different story. They were a testament to Elvis's talent and his determination to make a comeback. As the camera panned back to the empty theater, the audience was left with a sense of anticipation. What would Elvis do next? Elvis's recording sessions in Memphis during 1969 were a mix of hits and misses, but they undeniably showcased his evolving style and the deep emotional connection he had with music. One of the tracks from these sessions, From a Jack to a King, was a playful rendition of Ned Miller's song. However, it didn't quite stand out compared to the other recordings. The overdubbed female voices seemed to detract from Elvis's somewhat casual, almost joking vocal performance, making the song feel less impactful. On the other hand, Hey Jude was a real mess. This recording, held back until 1972, was criticized for its incomplete feel. Elvis's lack of familiarity with the lyrics and his repeated off-key notes made it clear that he wasn't fully engaged in the recording process. Despite being released as a finished master, it felt more like an informal jam session. Some argued that it shouldn't be taken seriously, but the fact that it was released during Elvis's lifetime and with additional overdubs suggested that it was intended as a final product. This raised questions about Elvis's commitment to his career and respect for his fans. The following night, things improved significantly. Without Love was a powerful ballad from 1956 that Elvis infused with a gospel feel. Unlike some of his later, more bombastic ballads, this one was performed with a more restrained and heartfelt touch. I'll Hold You in My Heart was particularly moving. Elvis sang the song with deep emotion, repeating it in a way that felt genuine and heartfelt, without ever feeling forced. This performance was praised by critics, who noted its haunting emotionalism and the way it defied easy description. I'll Be There was a cover of a Bobby Darin song that Elvis transformed with his natural flow and emotional depth. Despite not knowing all the lyrics, he made the song his own, showing how a good performance can elevate even a mediocre original. The session concluded with Suspicious Minds, a song that would become one of Elvis's most iconic. The unique bridge and fade-out fade-in ending made it instantly memorable, blending commercial appeal with artistic brilliance. The February 1969 sessions continued the momentum from January. Elvis and the same band members were back, and they started with a jam session that included This Time and I Can't Stop Loving You. The first song they recorded, True Love Travels on a Gravel Road, was given a soulful and driving rhythm that set it apart from the original country version. Stranger in My Own Hometown was a transformation of Percy Mayfield's 1963 song. Elvis extended the song, repeating the verses with subtle changes and improvising over instrumental breaks. This recording captured the joy and spontaneity of making music, and it showcased Elvis's blues singing skills. And The Grass Won't Pay No Mind by Neil Diamond was performed with a gentle, delicate touch, despite the song's challenging vocal range. The female backing vocals and strings added a sweetness that complemented Elvis's stunning vocal. Power of My Love was an edgy rock number in waltz time, where Elvis delivered a dramatic and almost threatening performance. This song, written by the prolific songwriting team of Giant, Baum, and Kay, was a highlight of the session. After Loving You was another country song that Elvis sang with a passionate, storytelling approach, repeating the last lines over and over. Do You Know Who I Am was a quiet ballad that seemed like a sequel to Just Tell Her Jim Said Hello. Elvis's performance was convincing and heartfelt, showcasing his storytelling abilities. Kentucky Rain was a dramatic narrative song about a lost lover. Despite not reaching the top 10, it was a strong performance that critics praised for its genre-blurring vitality. Only the Strong Survive was a soul cover of Jerry Butler's hit. Elvis's version was solid but closely followed the original, lacking the transformative touch he brought to other songs. It Keeps Right on a Hurtin' and If I'm a Fool for Loving You were country numbers with a more laid-back feel, though they were less memorable than other tracks from the sessions. Any Day Now had a challenging melody, but Elvis handled it with ease, blending soul influences with a touch of Tom Jones. The Fair Is Moving On and Who Am I were recorded on the final night. The former had a big, belting chorus, while the latter was a quiet, well-sung religious number that, while pleasant, lacked commercial appeal. The material from these sessions was spread across 2 albums, From Elvis in Memphis and Back in Memphis, as well as several singles. From Elvis in Memphis received mixed reviews, with some praising Elvis's voice and others criticizing the production and balance. Back in Memphis was generally better received, though the live performances from the double album, From Memphis to Vegas, From Vegas to Memphis, often overshadowed the studio recordings. Despite the mixed reactions, these sessions marked a significant period in Elvis's career, where he explored new genres and delivered some of his most emotionally resonant performances. The year 1969 was a turning point for Elvis Presley. The recordings he made during the first 2 months of the year, now celebrated as some of his best work, didn't receive the critical acclaim they deserved at the time. This was puzzling, especially since the live performances he gave later in the year were widely praised. The issue wasn't with Elvis's talent. It was more about the critics' nostalgia for his early days. Peter Guralnick, a respected music writer, gave the album From Elvis in Memphis a glowing review, but still felt it couldn't match the freshness and enthusiasm of Elvis's early Sun Records recording. Guralnick's longing for those early days was more about his own youth than about the quality of Elvis's new music. Despite this, the Memphis sessions produced 3 top 10 singles, showing that Elvis was still relevant and capable of creating hit music. Elvis's last scripted film, Change of Habit, tried to be more relevant to the late 1960s but fell short. The movie was naive and out of touch, even though Elvis gave a relaxed and charming performance. The film's soundtrack included 4 songs, 3 of which appeared in the movie. Change of Habit stood out as a decent rock number with a strong bass line, while Let Us Pray was a more straightforward religious song. Have a Happy was a sappy ballad, but Let's Be Friends was a standout, with an attractive melody and sincere delivery. After the film, Elvis focused on his return to live performances. His season at the International Hotel in Las Vegas, starting on July 31, 1969, was his first live show in 8 years. The reviews were overwhelmingly positive. Billboard praised him as a polished and confident artist, and other critics noted his energy and talent. The live album, In Person at the International Hotel, captured the essence of these shows. It started with Blue Suede Shoes, which Elvis delivered with strong vocals and high energy. Johnny Be Good and All Shook Up followed, each performed at a fast pace. Are You Lonesome Tonight was given a serious and moving rendition, with Millie Kirkham's soprano adding a haunting quality. Elvis introduced Hound Dog with self-deprecating humor, but the performance felt a bit unstructured. I Can't Stop Loving You was a standout, with a sincere and playful vocal and a stunning big finish. My Babe showcased Elvis's vocal strengths, and the medley of Mystery Train and Tiger Man was a high-energy highlight, featuring great drum work by Ronnie Tutt. The success of these live performances marked the third and final act of Elvis's comeback. Despite the mixed reception of his earlier recordings, Elvis had proven that he could still captivate audiences with his live shows, and he was ready to take on a new chapter in his career. Elvis's return to the live stage in 1969 was a huge success, but not everything was perfect. When he performed in the Ghetto, a powerful song from the studio, it didn't have the same impact live. The arrangement was bigger, but something was lost in the translation. Elvis's voice wasn't in the best shape, and he struggled with the low notes, making them sound shaky and sometimes out of tune. It was clear that Elvis hadn't figured out how to bring the intimate feeling of the studio to the stage, and this became a recurring issue over the next few years. He tended to choose songs with big arrangements and big choruses for his live shows, which worked better in the concert setting. Songs like I'm Leavin' and Until It's Time for You to Go, which were more fragile, were beefed up for live performances. It would have been nice if Elvis had a section in his shows where he stripped back the arrangements to just him and a couple of musicians, giving the quieter songs a chance to shine and adding some variety to the performance. The highlight of the 1969 Vegas season was Suspicious Minds. This was Elvis's latest single, and he turned it into a showstopper that lasted over 7 minutes. Even though it lacked some of the subtle nuances of the studio version, The energy and build-up of the live performance made it a crowd favorite. The excitement was palpable, and it worked surprisingly well even on the album. The shows ended with Can't Help Falling in Love, which was performed at a faster pace than the original studio recording. This made it feel more like a closing credits theme than a fully committed performance. Over the next 8 years, this song became a staple in Elvis's shows, signaling the end of the performance. The live section of the double album, In Person at the International, received some of the best reviews of Elvis's career. Critics praised his vocal performance and the mix of old and new material. Robert Hilburn called it the best thing Presley has done on record in years, highlighting Elvis's unique vocal style. In 1970, RCA released another live album, On Stage, featuring performances from February 1970. The album included 10 tracks, all covers of hits from the past decade. CC Rider was a standout, becoming Elvis's standard opener in later shows. The song was transformed into a high-energy rocker, and Elvis's performance was crisp and clean. Release Me was a faster, bluesier version of the country classic, but it felt a bit repetitive. Sweet Caroline was a straightforward cover of the Neil Diamond hit, pleasant but not groundbreaking. The Wonder of You became a huge international hit, marking the beginning of the 1970s Elvis. The song's sentimental lyrics and big, orchestral arrangement made it a fan favorite. Elvis's vocal performance was strong, and the song became one of his most requested. In 1991, RCA released a 3-album set called Collector's Gold, featuring outtakes and more performances from the 1969 Vegas season. These recordings showed that the 1969 double album could have been entirely live, with songs like I Got a Woman, Heartbreak Hotel, and a medley of Jailhouse Rock and Don't Be Cruel standing out. Elvis also tried out newer material like Rubbernickin' and Inherit the Wind, though some performances suffered from Elvis losing focus and fooling around. Over the years, complete concerts from the 1969 Vegas season were released, showing the consistency of Elvis's shows. The most interesting performances were those that deviated from the standard set list, like the dinner and midnight shows from August 26th. These shows included alternate arrangements and one-off performances, giving a more varied and loose feel. Despite the success, Elvis's set list in 1969 was surprisingly restricted, focusing mainly on rock and roll with only a few ballads. There were few nods to his country influences or gospel music, which would become more prominent in later years. The 1969 shows were built on the black leather segments of the 1968 TV special, and while they were a huge success, they also marked the beginning of a routine that Elvis would follow for years. By 1970, Elvis had solidified his return to the top, but the next few years would see a gradual decline in his vocal quality and performance levels. RCA did a good job of hiding this decline by compiling albums from various sessions, but keen observers could see the changes. The 1970 performances were energetic and engaging, but by the time of the Aloha from Hawaii broadcast in 1973, Elvis seemed subdued and less connected to his audience. This period marked the beginning of a shift in Elvis's musical interests, moving from rock and roll to big ballads, country music, and easy listening. Many fans found this change hard to accept, feeling betrayed by the new direction. The 1970s saw Elvis settle into a routine of Vegas seasons, recording sessions and tours, but the signs of decline were starting to show. Elvis's performances in Vegas during February 1970 showed a significant change in his approach to music. He was now more into drama and theatricality, which some critics didn't appreciate. For example, in his version of Polk Salad Annie, a song by Tony Joe White, Elvis turned it into a big, dramatic show. White's version had a lot of Southern charm, but Elvis made the words almost irrelevant, focusing more on his stage presence and the over-the-top orchestration. This was a trend that continued as Elvis's performances became more and more exaggerated over the years. Elvis also mixed different genres of music in his songs. For instance, in Proud Mary, he blended rock with gospel by using backing vocals from the Imperials and the Sweet Inspirations. This fusion of styles became a hallmark of his later work, especially in songs like Never Been to Spain and Lottie Miss Claudie. Walk a Mile in My Shoes, a song by Joe South, was a great fit for Elvis. He combined country and gospel elements, giving the song a spiritual feel. However, this song didn't stay in his set list for long, which is surprising given how well it suited him. Elvis's version of Let It Be Me was another highlight from this period. Although it was a bit more subdued, Elvis's performance was committed and had a gospel touch, similar to The Wonder of You. Despite its quality, it didn't feel like a fitting end to the album, making the listening experience feel a bit anticlimactic. Critics had mixed reactions to these performances. Don Heckman, for example, thought the arrangements were too over the top for Las Vegas, while Albert Goldman humorously described Elvis's performances as a series of dramatic poses. However, not all critics were negative. Jack Lloyd noted that Elvis was closer to his roots and responded well to a live audience. Lou Harris from the Chicago Tribune praised Elvis for his strong singing. After the Vegas shows, Elvis performed at the Houston Astrodome for the Houston Livestock Show. Despite breaking attendance records, the shows were less polished. Elvis seemed nervous and had some vocal issues, especially in the first show. The band's placement also blocked the view for many audience members, which was corrected in later shows. In March, there were plans for a nationwide live closed-circuit entertainment special, but this didn't materialize. Instead, Elvis signed a deal with MGM for a concert documentary, That's the Way It Is, which was filmed during his next Vegas season. In June, Elvis returned to Nashville for a major recording session. This was his first time recording there in 2.5 years. The sessions were different from the Memphis recordings, where arrangements were carefully planned. In Nashville, Elvis worked out the arrangements as he went, mixing new and old songs. The sound reflected his stage performances, blending country, rock, pop, and gospel in a unique way. The first song recorded was 20 Days and 20 Nights, a ballad that showcased Elvis's new, richer vocal tone. The next song, I've Lost You, became a template for the big, powerful ballads Elvis would record throughout the 1970s. Despite the critics' predictions, it only reached #32 in the US charts, but was a top 10 hit in the UK. Elvis then recorded I Was Born About 10,000 Years Ago, a gospel tune that captured the joy of music making. He also recorded The Sound of Your Cry, where he pushed the limits of the big ballad template he had created. This song had a catchy chorus, but Elvis's performance felt a bit forced, as if he was trying too hard to make it work. Elvis also recorded The Fool, a song he had previously recorded privately while in Germany. This time, the song had a harder rock feel, similar to the original by Sanford Clark. It was a mix of the meanness in his voice and a boogie-woogie style, showing the diversity of his musical influences. These sessions in Nashville marked a significant period in Elvis's career, where he explored new sounds and styles, blending different genres to create a unique musical identity. Despite the mixed reactions from critics, Elvis was clearly enjoying himself, and this joy is evident in the recordings from this period. The second night of recording brought 2 more bluegrass tunes, Little Cabin on the Hill and 100 Years From Now. Only Little Cabin on the Hill was released while Elvis was still alive. 100 Years From Now was left out, maybe because it was a bit too loose, but its charm lies in its relaxed feel. Elvis sounds like he's just enjoying a good time, singing songs he loves without the pressure of making a perfect record. That night ended with a fun version of Cindy, Cindy, a light-hearted song that shows Elvis having a good time with his band, even if his voice gets a bit harsh at times. They wrapped up 7 songs that night, and it was clear that Elvis was having a blast. The next night, Elvis tackled Bridge Over Troubled Water, a song originally by Simon and Garfunkel. Instead of copying the original's calm vibe, Elvis turned it into a powerful showpiece. The song builds up from a gentle start to a strong, gospel-like finish. When it was released, they even added fake applause to make it sound like a live performance, which was a common thing back then. Elvis's version is so good that it's hard to imagine anyone doing it better. Elvis also couldn't resist jumping into a jam session, mixing Got My Mojo Working and Keep Your Hands Off of It. The recording captures the joy of the moment, with everyone just having fun. The jam was later released on a less impressive album called Love Letters from Elvis, but it's one of the best parts of the session. They added some extra instruments to make it sound more polished, but the raw energy is still there. Another song from that night, How the Web Was Woven, was originally recorded by Jackie Lomax. Elvis's version is slower and more dramatic, turning it into a big ballad. Even though the lyrics are a bit strange, Elvis's vocal is strong, and the song is one of the best from the session. It's Your Baby, You Rock It is a country song with a faster tempo. The lyrics are a bit unusual, but Elvis's vocal is great, and it could have been a strong single. Stranger in the Crowd has a Latin flavor and is about the joys of love. Elvis's vocal is well controlled, and it worked well in his live shows, even though it wasn't a regular part of his set. The album Love Letters from Elvis has a unique sound thanks to the overdubs, which make it sound more like elevator music. The songs on this album are generally not as strong as the ones from the other albums, and the overdubs often bury Elvis's performances. For example, I'll Never Know is a nice ballad, but the overdubs make it sound forgettable. The undubbed version is much better, and shows that Elvis could still deliver a great performance. The last song of the evening, Mary in the Morning, is a country standard that Elvis reworked. The rhythm is a bit different, and it's a low-key performance, but it's pleasant to listen to and not as affected by the overdubs as some of the other songs. The third night of recording wasn't as impressive. It Ain't No Big Thing But It's Growing is a nice country song but not very memorable. You Don't Have to Say You Love Me was a hit, but it's mostly about showing off Elvis's powerful voice without much subtlety. Just Pretend is a dramatic song with a gospel feel and became a fan favorite, even though it wasn't released as a single. The remaining songs from the third night, This Is Our Dance, Heart of Rome, and Life, are the weakest of the session. This Is Our Dance is a bland copy of The Last Waltz, and Heart of Rome is another song where Elvis's powerful voice is more of a liability than an asset. Life tries to mix the Bible with Darwinism, but it's more bizarre than anything else. The production is good, but the song itself is not. The fourth night started with When I'm Over You, a decent but unremarkable song. However, things picked up when Elvis started working on songs for a country-themed album. I Really Don't Want to Know is a country ballad that shows off Elvis's new, richer voice. He sings it with passion but without overdoing it, and it became a single, though it didn't do very well on the charts. Faded Love is a song Elvis had played earlier in the session. This time, he added a tougher sound and belted out the chorus. The arrangement is more rock than country, and it's a fun, energetic performance. Tomorrow Never Comes is a ballad that Elvis turns into a powerful performance, building up to a dramatic finish. It's a stunning recording, but it never made it into his live shows. Make the World Go Away is a bit weaker, and while Elvis's vocal is good, the arrangement doesn't do much to make the song stand out. Funny How Time Slips Away by Willie Nelson is a standout, with Elvis in a relaxed mode. The song has a leisurely tempo and a great instrumental break. It's a masterful recording, and a significant improvement over a live version he did the year before. I Washed My Hands in Muddy Water is another fun song where Elvis and the band seem to be having a great time. The full version, which is about 5 minutes long, shows Elvis playing with the melody and having a blast. 2 non-country songs were also recorded. The Next Step Is Love is a pop song about a friendship turning into love. It has a modern sound with influences from the Beatles and Jimmy Webb. Love Letters, a song Elvis had recorded before, was given a new take. However, this version doesn't add much new, and sounds a bit tired after a long night of recording. Despite the ups and downs, these sessions produced some of Elvis's best work, capturing his love for music and his ability to deliver powerful performances. The final night of recording was a tough one. Elvis and his band were tired, and the songs they had to work with weren't the best. The night started with There Goes My Everything, a country song that wasn't very exciting. Elvis sang it well, but the song itself didn't have the same spark as some of the others from the previous night. It was nice, but nothing special. Next, they tried If I Were You, another country tune. The lyrics were a bit off-putting with lines like, If I were you, I know that I'd love me. It sounded a bit conceited, and it was hard to like the song. Despite the weak material, Elvis did his best to make it work. It was written by Gerald Nelson, who had also penned other songs for Elvis, but it didn't quite measure up to his better work. Then came Only Believe, a gospel song. Elvis sounded a bit bored, and the song itself was pretty bland. It was a surprise that he even tried it out in Vegas a year later, but it didn't stick around for long. The song was released as the B-side to Life, but it didn't do much for fans. Sylvia was a big ballad, and while Elvis seemed to enjoy it, the song itself wasn't very memorable. It was one of those tracks that just didn't stand out, even though Elvis gave it his all. The last song of the night was Patch It Up, a rock number by Eddie Rabbitt. It was a high-energy performance, and Elvis and the band put everything they had left into it, but even then it didn't quite hit the mark. They tried to make it a showstopper, but it only lasted 2 performances before being dropped from the set list. Despite the challenges, the 5 nights of recording produced over 30 songs. These were released as singles and on 3 albums. That's the Way It Is was one of these albums, and it tied in with the concert documentary of the same name. The album included some of the best ballads from the sessions, like How the Web Was Woven, Bridge Over Troubled Water, and You Don't Have to Say You Love Me. It also had 4 live recordings from Elvis's Las Vegas shows in August 1970. Billboard magazine was optimistic, calling it a certain smash. However, not everyone was a fan. Richard Meltzer from Rolling Stone was particularly harsh, criticizing Elvis for moving towards more middle-of-the-road material. His review was full of insults and didn't make much sense. It was clear that Meltzer was upset about Elvis's change in style, but his criticism was more about his own expectations than the quality of the music. Years later, when people looked back at That's the Way It Is, they saw it differently. In 2007, Neil McCormick from the Daily Telegraph wrote that it was one of the finest country rock albums ever made. He praised Elvis's energy and the performances of his band, especially on songs like I Washed My Hands in Muddy Water. The second album from the sessions, Elvis Country I'm 10,000 Years Old, received more positive reviews. Peter Guralnick, a respected music writer, called it something truly exceptional, highlighting Elvis's passion and engagement. He saw it as a continuation of the history Elvis had started with his music. The final album, Love Letters from Elvis, wasn't as well received. It was seen as a collection of leftovers, with inappropriate overdubs that made it sound like Muzak. Critics like John Landau in Rolling Stone were disappointed, but they still had high hopes for Elvis. Landau suggested that if Elvis were given the chance to make a rock album, it would be a huge success. This shows that even when Elvis was making great music, some critics couldn't accept his change in style. After the recording sessions, Elvis started preparing for a concert movie called That's the Way It Is. The rehearsals were a mix of serious work and Elvis's playful side. He would often break into random songs like Froggy Went A-Courtin', and then suddenly focus on getting the arrangements just right. Robert Blair Kaiser, a journalist, described one of these moments where Elvis took charge, directing the band and working on the arrangement of I Just Can't Help Believin'. These rehearsals were never meant for release, but some of the recordings have been released over the years. Some of the best moments are on bootleg tapes, where Elvis is really working on the songs and not just goofing around. There are great versions of I Just Can't Help Believin', Mary in the Morning, and Make the World Go Away. It would be nice if an official release captured these moments, showing Elvis at his best during the rehearsals. When Elvis took the stage in Las Vegas, the shows were recorded, but only a few tracks were released during his lifetime. I've Lost You was a live version of a song from the June sessions. The performance was good, but the recording had some issues, like the oboe being out of time. I Just Can't Help Believin' was a standout, with a subtle arrangement that built to a thrilling climax. It was a highlight of the shows and one of Elvis's best live recordings. Patch It Up was another story. It was a high-energy rock song, but it never quite took off. Elvis tried to make it a showstopper, but it only lasted 2 performances. You've Lost That Lovin' Feelin' was a different kind of showstopper. With dramatic lighting and a quiet opening, Elvis turned it into a powerful piece of theater. He showed that he could command an audience with just his voice and the right arrangement. These recordings and performances were a mix of highs and lows, but they showed Elvis's ability to adapt and create something special, even with less than ideal material. Despite the challenges, the music from this period remains some of Elvis's most beloved and enduring work. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, found himself in the news for reasons he would rather forget as 1971 began. A paternity suit was haunting him, and though it eventually went away, it left a mark. To make matters worse, death threats were reported, adding an extra layer of tension to his performances. Security was tight when he kicked off his fourth Las Vegas season on January 26th, but the tension seemed to have an effect on his shows. They were shorter, lasting about 40 minutes instead of the usual hour, and Elvis's energy was lacking. He seemed less engaged, and the audience could tell. Despite the challenges, Elvis tried to keep things interesting. He added a few new songs to his set, like Only Believe and Snowbird, but it was hit or miss. Sometimes he'd find his groove, especially during ballads like Something and There Goes My Everything. Slowly, as the season went on, Elvis started to regain his spark. The shows got longer, and his performances became more passionate. It was a roller coaster, but it set the tone for the rest of the year, filled with highs and lows. In March, Elvis hit the studio again. The session wasn't his best. He arrived late and seemed to lack the enthusiasm he had shown in previous sessions. The two songs they recorded, Snowbird and Where Did They Go, Lord, were okay, but they lacked the finesse and artistry that fans had come to expect. The other song, Rags to Riches, was a different story. Elvis belted it out with a bombastic energy that was almost overwhelming, but it worked. The highlight of the session was a wild, manic version of Whole Lot of Shackin' Goin' On. It was like nothing he had done in years, and it was clear that something was driving him, though it wasn't clear what. Elvis's performances throughout the year continued to be a mix of great and not so great. He added songs like Trying to Get to You, Blue Christmas, and How Great Thou Art to his set, and they were generally well received. However, there were moments when he seemed out of sorts, like during a November performance in Inglewood, where he spent too much time reminiscing and talking about his past successes, which didn't sit well with some critics. One of the most surprising and memorable moments of the year came in December when Elvis, in a bold and unexpected move, wrote a letter to President Nixon and requested a meeting. To everyone's surprise, Nixon agreed, and the two met at the White House. It was a strange and surreal moment, but it showed that even at the height of his fame, Elvis was still capable of surprising people. As 1971 came to a close, it was clear that Elvis was at a crossroads. He had the talent and the charisma, but he was also dealing with personal and professional challenges that were taking a toll. The year had been a mix of triumphs and struggles, and it left many wondering what the future held for the king of rock and roll. Despite the ups and downs, Elvis continued to captivate his audience, and his legend only grew.